You are watching ManWorld.
Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I know it's been a long time since our last episode, and I'm really sorry for the delay. Thank you so much for sticking around and being patient. I'm super excited to finally share this new episode with you all. I hope you enjoy it. 15 days had passed. The North Ridge Cave was completely wrecked, while the Moyong family pavilion still stood on the ground. Inside, you can see Dong Chion sulking, his eyes full of sadness as he talks to himself internally that it's only that day he would be sad. He was holding a bottle of wine as he mourned for the loss of one of his sons, Kwang Song. He remembered how Kwang Song closed his eyes with the blue marks all over his face. He talks as if he was talking to his lost son, that even if he died in vain, he won't be sad anymore. Kwang Song's death will become incidental to the Moyong family because he believes it's just a small foundation. With the last sip of the 1,000 days wine, Dong Chion will forget the sadness of losing his son. He sat on top of what seemed like a throne in a big empty room and hung his arms, then dropped the bottle of wine. He continued his talk inside his head that for the sake of their family, to be covered with blood is nothing to be afraid of. The bottle of wine creates a loud thud as it lands on the floor. Dong Chion created a plan in his head, and first, he will wipe out the remaining people of Ryak village. He leaned on the back of the seat. They will start with Ryak village and then merge with other factions. Those bastards from the 5 families wouldn't dare to do anything. He admitted that he lost a lot, but just a little more time and his plans won't be disrupted by anyone anymore. Then suddenly he felt a pain on his left shoulder. He quickly touched it and then blamed Saou, which he calls young bastard. Again, he recalls Saou's stance. He was confused how his name, age, faction, martial arts, everything about him is unknown. He closes his eyes and wonders whose disciple Saou belongs to, because his martial arts is something that Dong Chion haven't seen before. He closed his eyes thinking it is such a useless thought. He knew that Saou died along with the destroyed North Ridge Cave. The window opened and he curiously glanced. Surprisingly, Saou stood in front of him with his arms covered with his power. Dong Chion was stunned to see him then. Saou reminded him about taking his life. Flashback of the night where North Ridge Cave was destroyed. In the dark, a flash of power was visible. Then, a strong light force was able to pierce through the rocks. It shows the graceful hand of Saou, and the rocks float everywhere. The elder said behind him that Saou always makes him surprised. He admitted that when the Great Destruction was stimulated, he thought everything was over. He actually couldn't believe that it's that easy to get out of it. He thanked Saou because not just the Goryeo people, but also the North Wind Virtue's talent and survivors of Ryak village were able to escape. The elder was relieved that he was able to breathe fresh air again. Then, an old man with beard and several missing teeth suddenly spoke. He called the attention of Saou about the girl that Saou was looking for. He asked if it could be that she's a girl with Han family name. Saou became interested. He glanced at the old man and asked if he knew her. He also added that the age of the girl that time was around 6 to 7 years old. The old man slouched as he held on his stick, ready to share his story. He starts off by saying that he's been locked up in the cave for 20 years now. At that time, the Moyong family captured men and women of all ages. However, all powerless women and children who were struggling to do excavation work were sold to slave traders. After that, they used the money to fund the excavation of the North Ridge Cave. During that time, a Goryeo girl with Han family name was captured, and if he could remember it correctly, her name was Hansang. Then, a familiar figure was shown. It was exactly as Saou's master remembered. The old man noticed that she didn't seem suitable for her age. She was smart and cold-hearted. But, no matter how smart she was, in the end she was just a child. Soon, she was sold to a slave trader. He informed Saou that the record of the slave transaction might be in Moyong Dong Chion's possession. If Saou finds it, he might be able to find Hansang. Saou stared at him for a while. He guessed that it would all end up as an unfortunate affinity of Moyong Dong Chion. End of flashback. Back to the present, we can see Saou's hands multiplied while covered with his electric charge. Dong Chion was shouting in excruciating pain as his body snapped internally. His eyes and mouth were open. He trembled as the veins around his eyes popped. Saou moved closer and reminded him about the time where Saou told him that he will give him pain worse than death. Dong Chion's eyes widened as Saou's energy was visible to his face. He uses his ability and he utters that it is time for Dong Chion to pay for all of his sins. It can be seen outside the light that came from Saou's powerful charge. It lit up blue, and the next thing that happened was that the room lost its light. Gunsong knocks to the room and opens the door. He announces that they've finished the preparation for them to go to the Iron Martial Association, which Dong Chion ordered. They were paying respect as Gunsong continued talking. He mentioned that GA and him are there because they want to let their father know the reason why they had to destroy De Ryak village from the Iron Martial Association and that the Moyong family is in a good condition. Also, they were there to greet him before they left. They bowed, and when they didn't get a response, Gunsong opened his eyes and called his father's attention. Upon opening his eyes, he was in horror to see his father with missing arms and looking at the other arm. It had the flow of electric energy. They were both angry and shocked to witness their father's dead body. Gunsong immediately ordered GA to call the physician as soon as possible. He was horrified and tried to tell his father to hang in there. Dong Chion's eyes were open and his face was covered in blue marks. As soon as Gunsong shouts, we can see Saou already flew out to the crime scene. He was holding something, and as soon as he landed, for the last time he looked up from where he came from and held the wooden slip. Under the full moon, Saou's shadow is visible. He flew up high again and landed at one of the windows. As soon as he entered the room, a voice was heard asking if he got what he wanted. Saou was taken back. It was the elder, whom he noticed drinking a glass of liquor in the moonlight. He commented that it must be quite delicious. The elder talked about how Moyong Dong Chion became a bad guy in the world. When he was once revered as a hero in Shenyang, he suggested drinking a glass of liquor on his final day. Saou remained standing and told the elder he doesn't have a sensitive personality, so there's no reason for him to drink liquor because of Dong Chion. Saou held the wooden slip and proclaimed that he was satisfied enough that he got the clue regarding the daughter of his master. The elder replied and called him a cold guy. Well, from Saou's point of view, Dong Chion was just a bad guy who kidnapped his friend. The elder did not care and just wanted to drink some more, for the reason that he couldn't drink some when he was locked up in the North Ridge Cave. The elder drinks the liquor and then remembered something. He glanced at Saou and told him that there's something that can help him find the girl. Saou became interested and gazed at him. He cut off the elder and asked a favor. The wooden slip is laid in front of him as Saou before continuing what he was saying. He asked him if he knew what the black merchant was. The elder looked at him and didn't expect to hear that name from him. The elder narrates what he knows about the black merchants. He stated that it is known as a group of black merchants, but actually it's hard to define them in a word. It can be seen wherein a group of people was covered in long black cloth. It's basically known as an association of merchants, but it's all just rumors. No one knows anything about the leader, the scale, or what kind of merchant groups had gathered in that association. That association is sensitive to information when it comes to matters of its own interest. Anywhere, anything. It's known that there is no place that has not been intervened by that association, even if it's human trafficking that violates the moral law. The elder's face became serious and said that one thing's for sure is that it has a close relationship with the Five Dragons League. Saou was disappointed because in the end, he can't find out anything except its relationship with the Five Dragons League, and it's almost the same as nothing. The elder agrees that it's almost the same as nothing, but of course he boosted himself up that it's not impossible, especially for him to find those black merchants. Saou was swayed and took interest in the elder's words and asked if there was a way. The elder thought about it and said that it was all he could say for free. Saou's lips formed into a thin line. He verbalized that according to the creed of Jabang, all information comes at a reasonable price. Then, asked the elder if it's true. He just looked at him curiously. Saou thought of a reasonable price and then handed a shining marble on his palm. He asked if it would be enough. The elder flinched and was amused to see the shining marble right before his eyes. He was quite sure that a single marble equals to 1,000 golds, and it's his first time to see such a perfect form of shining marble. He gulped at the thought of gold and sweats as he was fighting his urge to accept the marble. He closes his eyes as he pushes back Saou's hand. The elder was flustered as he tried to tell Saou that indeed, The shining marble is worth the price. Then he asks Saou if he thinks that the elder of the Jabang would be shaken by a shining marble. He tried his best to focus on his goal. He pointed his finger at Saou and told him that he has something else that he truly wants. Saou was intrigued that why would the elder be embarrassed about the shining marble. Again, the elder narrates what happened 10 years ago. Late at night, there were two men standing near the dragon statue. It was Saou's master and the elder. He recalled how he saw an unbelievable martial arts technique being performed on the bronze black dragon statue in Hailu Pyong. The black dragon statue looks like it has its own mind and crumpled itself. Because of it, the elder's concept of martial arts was destroyed forever, and he realized how nonsense it was to train in traditional martial arts. He stated that the old man's words prevented him from leaving Shenyang. The old man utters that his disciple is coming. That's why the elder waited in front of the bronze black dragon statue, without knowing when the disciple would come. 1 year, spring passed by, 2 years, and rains appeared. 10 autumns came and 10 winters have passed. Until one day, he heard galloping horses and men talking from afar that they could see the bronze black statue. The elder became wary and saw a group of men together with Saou. As soon as the elder saw the blue-haired man at the back of the carriage, he knew it at once, the moment he saw Saou. The person he had been waiting for the past 10 years, the descendant of that old man who has the same eyes as him. Saou glanced at him, and he spoke to the elder. It has been 10 years. It seems like the elder knew his master. He asked the elder if he wanted to know the secret of the heavenly artillery general's force. The elder drinks his liquor. He replies that now he said it, he cannot deny that it is what he wanted the most. But, as he said before, to get information, they have to pay the price. He grinned at Saou and convinced him if they think the same, and if it is so, they should help each other. The elder asked him if it was a pity to leave things as they are. He was talking about their equal position. Saou formed his hands and vowed that he would like to make an equal deal with Jabang's elder Hong Mu-gyu. Heavenly Artillery General's force is passed down from one person to another, so he doesn't know everything about it. But he promised to tell the elder everything he knew. The elder grinned and also touched his hands and made a vow that he, Jabang's elder Hong Mu-gyu, whoever Saou wants to find, no matter how many people he wanted to find, the elder promises to provide his full support with all the capabilities of Jabang. They both faced and looked at each other with sincerity. The elder claimed it as a deal. The sky is clear, and we can see the elder and Saou walking up a hill. The elder started saying that they should go together, because as it can be seen Saou is walking ahead of him. He asked Saou why he is in such a hurry to leave without saying goodbye. Saou should at least inform him. The elder caught up while holding his liquor, and Saou replied that it was his master's request that he should go to Taiwan to look for his daughter. The elder understands and told him that no matter how fast they go, it would take at least a month to reach there, so it's useless to rush. He took out a book and handed it to Saou. He wanted him to take it because it contains basic information about HoHo, which is essential for Saou's work. It is called the HoHo Information Book, wherein it contains all information about the names of famous people and their characteristics. Saou curiously looked at the book and eventually took it. They walked as he read the details. The elder told him that money, power, and military prowess, all important, but nothing is as powerful as information. Saou became intrigued by the Rainy Sword Saint and Fist Saint. He actually remembers hearing about them. They are called the Three Saints, and they are semi-immortal. Fist Saint, Wangbo Gun AK, he has a toned body, shirtless with red hair and beard shaped like a lion. He had what seemed like a cape and was wearing pants just right about his knee. All what he was wearing was colored red. He seems like a fierce fighter. He was driven out of North Yuan. The Iron Martial Association was the greatest power created during the Ming Dynasty. The three organizations that made up the Iron Martial Association were the Five Dragon League, Lion League, and the Nine Centrals. He is the leader of the Five Dragon Leagues. The other person from the Three Saints, the Rainy Sword Saint. He is leading the Old Central, as well as the Five Dragon League, the center of the Iron Martial Association. Unlike the other one, he is screaming the color blue. He has long hair and beard as well as horns. A glowing eyes that is looking right in front of a long sword. He is the Rainy Sword Saint, unbeatable. Back to the elder and Saou. The elder told him that those two are known to be the best, but he is not sure about that. He continued feeding Saou information that there are also some people on par with the three saints. There are the three tyrants and four honors, who are known to be almost the same level as the saints. The three magnificents and the three blossoms are known to be HoHo's masters. Three being shown, two are facing away from each other, and the last one is facing in front with more of a dark aura. They are the three magnificents, the three iron sword march, the shadow sword, and the north wind virtue's talent. And the three blossoms are the bloody plum blossom, lotus blossom, and ice blossom. It showed three elegant-looking women screaming their own aura. The three magnificents and the three blossoms are HoHo's greatest masters. Saou's eyes were pinned to that familiar north wind virtue's talent. The elder made it clear to him that it was indeed familiar because the person they met in Shenyang named Cheonpo Rin was the north wind virtue's talent. Next is the unmatched sword tyrant, Cheonpo Song. He has a big scar on his right eye. He is known to be the best among the three saints. He is leading the Lion League. One of the pillars of the Iron Martial Association and Day Ryak Village is a faction of the Lion League. You might be wondering why Cheonpo Rin is in one frame with Cheonpo Song. Well, to answer that, Cheonpo Rin is the son of Cheonpo Song, and he's one of the successors who will lead HoHo in the future. The elder and Saou are still on their track. The elder told him that the three magnificents and the three blossoms are in the same age as Saou, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to get along with them, if he had the chance. And Saou replied, well, if there's a chance. They kept walking thinking about the three magnificents and the three blossoms until the day had ended, and night took over. The elder still can't let go of his liquor and continue drinking. They are seated in front of a fireplace, while the elder keeps complimenting his liquor, and Saou just peacefully reading the book. While still looking at the book, he called upon the elder about the few things written about the masters, and after reading it, Saou thinks the skill of the three blossoms are not enough. He recalled the three saints and asked again if there is anyone stronger than the three saints. The question got the elder stopped from drinking and glanced at Saou. He answered that there's only one person. Saou's brows frowned and his eyes full of curiosity. He asked about the only, and if there is a master that he didn't know about. The elder answered that according to others, there is a person in northern Yuan called the Lord of Heaven. It showed a man's stance with a powerful aura. His abilities are extremely wonderful to the point that even if the three saints, three tyrants, and three honors join hands, they still can't win against him. A man's face with glowing eyes and fearful grin is portrayed. No one knows about his identity. Most people are saying that it is just a nonsense rumor. The elder truthfully said that he is not sure if there's anyone stronger than Saou. Saou didn't seem to care about it, and stuck to his thought about the Lord of Heavens from Yuan. He thought if it was the person who took Mu'ei Nuna. Saou stopped from reading and admitted that he is curious who that person is. The elder side-eyed him and brought Saou's attention to him about the Heavenly Artillery General's force. Saou curiously asked what's with it. The elder replied that he is very curious about it to the point that he is going crazy, and asked what the hell is the Heavenly Artillery General's force. Saou showed his hand and said that even him, it is not something he can easily define, but his master told him that it was a martial art technique created 1,000 years ago. There's nothing special about it. He was thought to look for gaps and attack, or block and avoid. There's even no specific food that he should eat. The elder looked disappointed. He repeated that what Saou was saying is that the Heavenly Artillery General's force is just like a street fight. But of course that doesn't explain it. Saou replied that if he was to explain the Heavenly Artillery General's force in his own words, you have to be knowledgeable about the structure of the human body. And you also need to learn about the thunder QI and the ghost eye. His hands release electrics and start to crackle. Once you have obtained the ghost eyes, you will be able to see the veins and QI of your opponent. Stimulating those veins can destroy your opponent's bones and muscles and drain their blood. While saying that there's also no exception to inanimate things, his eyes glowed and he released his force to his side. He continued saying that if you stimulate something like a vein, he stopped and showed that what he was aiming for earlier that he called inanimate things is the stone. His power pierced through the stone, creating a big hole. The elder stopped and looked quite taken back. Saou's palms were glowing as soon as he clenched his hand. The Heavenly Artillery General's force, Heavenly Strike, was a technique that made a huge glowing circle that was so powerful it made the elder fall to the ground. His eyes looked like they had seen a ghost. It was unbelievable even though he saw it with his own eyes now. He suddenly gulped, and like he said before, if Saou uses that on a human being or an object, he's simply invincible. He finally got up and his eyes grew bigger, eyeing his liquor that is now spilling to the ground. He called Saou a young mandan like a child having a tantrum because of the liquor. He accuses Saou for doing it on purpose, which was knocking it down. Saou replied like a grown man and cleared himself that he didn't do it on purpose. He changed the topic by saying that they should take a rest because they have to get up early for tomorrow. The elder couldn't accept it and still whines like a child because of his precious liquor. In Fushun, ryak village, there was a huge tree with stairs, and a conversation can be heard about the cause of Dong Chion's death. It was said to be a heart attack, and that's what the public has been informed. The leader of ryak Bo, Mangwangwu, was skeptical about the information. He asked the North Wind Virtue's talents what he thinks about it. He answered that if they knew about martial arts well, they wouldn't believe that Dong Chion died from a heart attack. He closed his eyes and was certain that Dan Saou did it. Under the moonlight, in their abode, they talked about Saou. The leader remembered that when there was a fight with the Moyong family because of the golden Binshi, something happened between Saou and Chu Saljo. One of its members was attacked by Saou. His whole cardiovascular system was torn apart, which caused his death. The leader was disappointed by the opportunity that they should have made Saou join them back then. The North Wind Virtue was certain that even if they tried to, he knew that Saou would have refused. Because he said it himself, he seems to have a bad feeling about ryak village. Adding further information, Saou fought the Moyong family because he found out that they were using the people of Goryeo. He remembered how Saou uttered the words that he doesn't like when people use him like a consumable in a fight. The ryak replied that he misunderstood them, plus those people from Goryeo were all paid mercenaries. Saou's eyes crackled as it showed a slash of bolt. He replied that it was that reason why the ryak village are still alive, because if it weren't for the deal, the ryak village would have disappeared along with the Moyong family. Back to the present, the North Wind Virtue picks up the sword as he claimed a relief that there was no sign of Saou joining the Five Dragons League. Additionally, Saou is not the person that the Lion League would want to compete with. The North Wind Virtue stood in front of the leader while holding his sword. He states his thought about the opportunity now that Dong Chion is dead. It would be a great advantage for the ryak village to take over Shenyang. As a member of the Lion League, the North Wind Virtue is looking forward to the great news. The leader replied to the fellow he's with that he must understand, they can't go far. If the place becomes stable, the leader will go and greet the unmatched sword tyrant. A footstep is heard, seeing the North Wind Virtue walk down the stairs, leaving the leader alone. He was consumed by the thought of Saou and became curious whether he will be an enemy or an ally. Under the moonlight, people have been talking about the situation for the past few days. About Dong Chion's death, ryak village's leader Man Guangwu's arm, Chu Saljo's unsightly iron mask. A fellow is walking with a sword on one hand while wearing a hat. The gossip continues about the two pillars of ryak village. Man Sung Hyan and Man Hansang were either fatally injured or dead. The man with a sword entered a local pub. The story continues that the man telling the story thought that their excellent sword group would end up as the victors until he showed up. Inside the pub were people surrounding the storyteller around the table. It looked like it was them who were talking earlier. The man with a sword approached another fellow sitting alone. When he arrived, he greeted him as his master. The master caught him off and asked him to greet him later because of an important scene. The master gestured to him in silence that made the follower shush. This master is known as the Great Heavenly Merchant Group, Master Trader John Du Su. He looked back at the people talking about when the Moyong family's two heroes and the intruders went to kill each other. He was with the Jabang's elder, wise man Hong Emogyo. Their storyteller became visible. It was a man holding a cup of his drink. He clenches his thigh using one hand as he describes the fear he felt. The storyteller mentioned that he, the man with the Jabang, was the embodiment of fear itself. A man who was in the battle inside the North Ridge Cave was the storyteller. He clenched his thigh, who lost its half part, and told them that whenever he thinks of that man, he trembles in fear. He reminisced the spotless hands, like those of a woman, long and slender jade hands. But he realized that it wasn't really the long and slender jade hands. They were the demon's hands. It showed Saou's hands that are beaming electric lights. With those hands of a demon, his dark aura and motionless face. He can twist someone's bones and blood vessels, and once his demon hands touch your legs, the bones and blood vessels of your legs will also be twisted. That's what happened to the excellent sword group. The storyteller claimed that he heard Saou speak, and he's sure that it's the language of Goryeo. The words that he heard was when Saou said, "Who dares to stay alive in front of him?" The master trader that was in the pub, who was listening closely, became wary as he realized that he knew who the lady he was looking for. The storyteller kept describing the moment Saou's hands touched the ground. There were 3 huge explosions, and the man telling the story lost his consciousness, and when he came back to his senses, the North Ridge Cave's huge ice lake was destroyed, and his leg was already cut, but he couldn't feel any pain, because he was too overwhelmed by the person who stood in front of him. His expression was like a king who had just won a war, the king of war. The last sentence made the crowd gasp. They kept mumbling the word king of war. The master trader called his follower, ManHwa, and asked if it wasn't an interesting story. ManHwa admitted that it was a terrible story. His knowledge about martial arts wasn't that deep. Cutting off limbs in one move and destroying the huge ice lake, both are unbelievable. Great Heavenly Merchant Group Sip ManHwa turned shocked as the master trader claimed that every legend starts with such a useless rumor. The master trader needs to go back to Taiwan and orders ManHwa to contact the Jabang. They must have information about the King of War. ManHwa obliged. The master trader almost forgot to ask ManHwa what was the cause of death of Dong Chion. He replied that others said Dong Chion died from a heart attack, but it is unclear whether it was caused by a chronic disease or an external force. ManHwa added that there were also rumors among the people in the village that he was assassinated. The master trader grabs his cup of water as he thinks of the information as an interesting one. He stated that the head of the family was assassinated, but they're talking about a different cause of death. He became curious about what exactly happened between the King of War and the Moyong family. His thoughts are clouded with the King of War. He thinks that King of War is a bit arrogant. He smirks and has a sip of water. On the other hand, a loud voice is screaming the King of War. He shouted to His Highness to wait for him. It was Saou. He turned around to the fellow shouting. Saou stated that he asked the fellow to ride a horse, but the fellow insisted that it was not that far. The fellow shouting turned out to be the elder. He replied tiredly to Saou, asking if he thinks the elder is able to move around for 3 days without a break. He groaned and continued to complain that Saou should consider his age as well, because he is not as energetic as him. In Shaanxi province, Taiwan, they've arrived. They are up in the hill. Saou asked the poor elder to hold on for a bit more because they've arrived in Taiwan. The tired elderly responded with relief. The two found a place to rest and talked about the reason they're in Taiwan. It is because there's a branch of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group there in Taiwan. The Great Heavenly Merchant Group has grown rapidly after the fall of the Yuan dynasty. The Black Merchants, which is a merchant association that formerly had almost all the profits of the mainland, is now most wary of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. The elder put it in simple words that they are there for surveillance, because a place where there's a branch of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group must also be the place with a branch of the Black Merchants. The elder boosted himself that fortunately, his association maintains a good relationship with the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. With that, they will definitely get good information about the Black Merchants. He called Saou King of War and told him not to worry and to trust him. Saou placed his face to his palm and stared directly outside. He was thinking about the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. Then suddenly he turned to his side and looked at the elder. He kept calling him the King of War, so Saou wondered what that meant. The elder was quite shocked while holding his bowl of noodles. He didn't mention it before to Saou. The elder was about to say the meaning of it in Shenyang, but then they heard voices outside the window. Before he could finish his sentence, the elder was interrupted by the person shouting "Bastard." Outside the window, they could see 3 fellow men, each holding a sword versus one. The 3 men ordered the person in front of them to pay respect to the young master of the Crane Soundwall, Huang Muik, and that he should get on his knees. Saou looked at the person and his pupil constrict. Up close, the man has this sharp features and face, has messy hair that looks like it has not been affected with gravity, and in all black clothes. He has his big fat sword at his back. Saou observes him, and his QI reeks of killing intent. He is dangerous. After stuffing his mouth of noodles, The elder took a glance outside. He was amused that they met the famous roughneck son of the Crane Soundwall. He thinks ahead that the situation will not run fine. The man spoke that he knew Hwang Muik very well, a selfish roughneck warrior who took advantage of his father's power to kill dozens of men, and also there were dozens of women humiliated by him who ended up killing themselves. He said that it hasn't been that long since the scum sons of Yuan were kicked out, and now the lowly warriors of demon outlanders are going rampant. The man is known to be the underworld devil sword. He is Kong Wai. The three men were angry. They gritted their teeth and asked what the hell the person of them was talking about. Another man spoke behind the three men. He ordered them to stop it. The men turned back and saw their young master. It turns out Muik was right behind them all along. His appearance fit perfectly to what Kong Wai described him as. He is overweight. He asked Kong Wai how much is it? How much does he need to pay to make Kong Wai work for him, and added that it seems like he is an assassin sent by someone who has a grudge against him. The young master can still offer him a position in the Crane Soundwall depending on Kong Wai's skills. Kong Wai smirked and said that the young master didn't really deserve to live since he is a devil. His sword made sound and he unleashed it. His face darkened and said that his sword came into existence to kill devils like the young master. His eyes is full of intent to kill as he grinned, uttering the word extinguish the devil. One man realizes and sweats as he recognizes the underworld devil sword. In a blink of an eye, he was thrust along with the other two men. They were sliced, leading to their death. Muik just stood witnessing their death right in front of him. He sweats and becomes nervous because he doesn't know what to do. The elder steps at the veranda. He claimed that he doesn't really like to move right after he eats. Saou just looked at him and asked if the elder wanted to interfere in the fight. Besides that roughneck doesn't seem to be someone worth helping. The elder agrees. The bastard Hwang Muik deserves to be torn to death no less than 10 times. But then, he also realized that the Crane Soundwall is one of the righteous groups, so they must have to catch that roughneck bastard and punish him according to the country's law. Then, he glances at Saou and asks if he wants to help. Saou did not throw him a glance and just linger his thoughts to the righteous groups. It seems like they judge righteousness only by their own profit. Eventually, he answered the elder and told him to do it himself. Saou has nothing to do with it, and he is not interested at all. He advised the elder to not let his guard down, because Kong Wai's skills may not be as good as Moyang Dong Chion, but he uses his martial arts to pursue murder. He warned the elder that he may be forced into unexpected circumstances. At the scene, Muik was about to be sliced in half by the underworld sword, but the elderly comes to the rescue. He jumped off the balcony and said to Kong Wai that he don't know what makes him attack the young master of the Crane Soundwall, but he can't solve a personal matter by killing. The elder landed with a kick towards Kong Wai, but with quick reflexes he was able to shield his arm. Too bad for him, the elder suddenly releases multiple kicks. It was so fast that Kong Wai hardly kept up. He was hit on different parts of his body, and the elder hit him again on his chest with his right hand that made Kong Wai fly off. Kong Wai was able to land on his feet as he felt the bruises on his body. He called upon his sword, and he commanded it while stuttering to extinguish the devil. He let go of his sword and threw it towards the elder. He did not move an inch and just waited for the sword to come. He told Kong Wai that it is hard to persuade him and sarcastically asked if he thinks he could extinguish the devil with that much of a skill. The elder kicks the sword effortlessly, and it comes flying off the sky. It's weird why it has an invisible or silver wire attached at the handle of the sword, but before the elder could react, Kong Wai was able to recall his sword and the elder was caught in his trap. The wire tightly wraps the elder's body. He grins devilishly as he shows his index finger with a circle that attaches the wire. Kong Wai pulls the wire, and it tightens even more. Then he was about to do his next move, but then Saou became alerted. He glowed his hands as he tried to figure out what Kong Wai's next move would be. His eyes glowed in sparks. He found a weapon, a chopsticks to control. He surrounded it with his power and whirled it around, pointed it directly towards Kong Wai. In a blink of an eye, the chopsticks surrounding Saou's martial arts swiftly cut the wire attached. Kong Wai was left dumbfounded. His eyes were big and was surprised at what had happened. The elder was not happy. He glared at Kong Wai because of the silver wire. He's a dangerous bastard. Kong Wai was still in shock because he knew it was not an ordinary silver wire. Even a famous sword can't cut it. He was surprised that Saou cut it with mere chopsticks. Even though he was still sweating, he yelled and called Saou a rat bastard. He told him to stop hiding and challenge a fair battle. As he looked up, there was no one on the balcony. He didn't notice where Saou went, but suddenly felt a hand grab his shoulder. Saou was right behind him and replied, about what he said earlier, a fair battle, and recall the secret weapon he used was not fair at all. Kong Wai's face was in horror as he shivered with the mere touch. Saou continued saying that if he wanted to have a battle with him, he had to put his life on the line. Kong Wai gasped and turned on his back. He immediately threw his sword at his opponent. Saou was able to utter that with his behavior, he chose to put his life on the line. Saou swiftly dodged the sword, and with the use of his foot, he managed to kick Kong Wai's face. It was so powerful that his face almost kissed the ground. As he was about to hit the ground, Saou held his hand, twisted it, and cracked his arm, making him feel the excruciating pain. His arm snapped, and Saou hit him with one hand that sent him flying off. Kong Wai crashed to the floor but was able to roll and stand back at his feet. He was panting and was very confused because he couldn't read his opponent's movement. He didn't notice his upcoming sword that Saou threw surrounding his martial arts on it. He was surprised but still able to dodge at the last minute. Saou calmly said that there is no point in avoiding it. His hands sparkled as he uttered the word Heavenly Artillery General's Force. He swiftly moved his sparking hands and snapped his fingers with his thunder QI. The sword that Kong Wai avoided exploded. It was so bright and powerful that it sent him to the other side. On the other hand, the elder was still expecting the silver wire on his hand. He thought that something is strange, even though it's a silver wire. He's sure that with his QI he could still easily. He was caught off with his words when he noticed the diamond powder in it. He thought he could be? Kong Wai was mercilessly on the ground. Saou's eyes had visible sparks. It glowed as he prepared to attack Kong Wai, forming a ball on his hands. He couldn't do anything but to accept his fate. Saou was already determined to take his opponent's life. But suddenly, he heard the elder shouting to not kill him. Saou heard it and took a glance at him, but still it was too late because he had already released his technique. His attack was spread all over the place, and it caused a blinding light. The nearby houses were destroyed and crumbled. The elder was left amused. He's quite unsure if they could get a corpse out of it. On the other hand, an eye that looked like it left a soul was shown. By the looks of it, it seems like he had already died and left in shock, not sure how to process all that was happening. Saou's hands did not actually hit his opponent, but just the side of his head. Saou faced the elder unbothered and said that he thinks there's a point in his action, so they should stop it there. He said to his opponent that he must go to the government official and plead guilty, or Saou's eye sparks. He continued saying that Kong Wai still wants to rely on his friend who has been looking at their way with an annoying look. He looked at him and gasped. He was shocked that Saou knew it all along. While at the top of the roof, a shadow of a person can be seen. He called out Kong Wai, the underworld evil sword, for trying to kill people in broad daylight rashly. That's why he was defeated. A man with a hat casually stood on the windy top while holding a bow. He suggests that when it comes to taking someone's life, you have to do it quietly. He complimented Saou for being such a talented man. He even can't believe he has such a strong QI, despite his young age. Up close, the man has a long mustache. He continues saying that no matter how strong Saou's QI is, he moved and picked using his finger a single arrow. He claimed that for a divine bow from 1,000 steps away, he pulled his bow strings and said that Saou is just an ordinary humanoid toy. His sharp eye wishes Saou die peacefully. He closes it, and as soon as he opens his eye, it has a golden flare to it. Before releasing his arrow, he uses his golden eye heavenly vision to execute his attack. As soon as he released his arrow, he claimed that there's a golden light in his eyes. He can see a falling needle 1,000 steps away. It is trained with polarity, so he can even see the waves of QI. The arrow travels and approaches close to the target. He can see the things it passes through, and in a second, the arrow is already behind Saou. The man on the roof was eager to pierce through his head, but as it was about to hit, Saou commands to stop it. The man on the roof was astonished because he used sound transmission. He sweats and flinches. Saou continued talking and told him that he's sure that he let the man off once. and that he shouldn't urge his death with stupid choices. The man's eyes were in rage and called him a bastard. He couldn't believe it, so he asked if Saou knew his existence all along. He was stupid enough not to believe it, so he still pulled his arrow and threatened to pierce Saou's head now. However, Saou just answered that he still stubbornly insists on doing it. His eyes sparked and was ready to fight. He released his power, and it found its way towards the man. He was electrified and felt the stagger on his body. His hat flew, showing his bare hair. He was mad, but at the same time smiled. He talked with Saou using the sound transmission and formed his hand in a respectful way. He told Saou that he is ashamed of himself because he can't identify his opponent's competence properly. He made sure that he will come back again to fight against the greatest master with good preparation and without any shame. Saou just looks ahead seriously and remains silent. The elder observes the place because it is such a mess. He turned to Saou and asked if it could be fixed again. Staring at Saou, he asked what's wrong with him because his face looks dead serious. Saou looked at the place where the man came from and thought that he left. He answered the elder that it was nothing. The two kept on track to where they were headed. At the moment they were on top of the hill and enjoying the nice view, but they must go now because they don't have time for sightseeing. On their trip, they talked about getting some Sagu soup because Saou hasn't eaten it before and it is the Jabang's secret recipe. Saou just slightly smiled because the elder wanted to hurry before those insect-like bastards ate up all the Sagu soup. Saou asked the elder because he's been curious earlier why did he ask him not to kill his opponent. The elder honestly told him it's about the silver wire he used. Saou just asked about the silver wire. He answered that the silver wire was made of diamond. It's a weapon often used by assassins from the black merchants. Of course, they can't conclude that the person is from the black merchant just because of that, but at least they can see that there's a relation between them. He is sure they'll be able to find the black merchant if they keep an eye on the person, which is Kong Wai. Saou was not impressed. It was not a very good idea, because it could have been dangerous if Kong Wai's friend cooperated with him. The elder was confused. He didn't know what friend Saou was talking about, if it was there as well. Saou just informed him that that man must have been a great martial artist, because he had been watching the elder from the moment he got involved in the fight. It could have been dangerous if they had cooperated from the start. The elder just smiled sheepishly. He didn't care because if anything happened, the King of War would have saved him. Saou felt teased because he is being called the King of War, and he claimed that he wouldn't save the elder. They walk upstairs, but the elder won't stop talking about how cool the title King of War is. Saou just followed and also teased him that the King of War sounds better than the Wise Man. The elder was in rage. He yelled what's wrong with the title Wise Man. As an old man, he feels proud of it. Saou just dealt with it in silence. They arrived at some place. Saou noticed that there is not a single word written on the signboard. The elder informed him that it means anyone can rest there. The Jabang is always open. They arrived at the structured building and walked through. Saou asked him that they were supposed to go to the branch office of Jabang. He thinks that place is just an abandoned temple. The elder replied that he seems to expect it to be a resplendent building. Saou defended himself that it was not what he meant, but surely he expects a lot since the elder told him it was a Jabang's branch office. The creak of the door being opened was all it heard. The elder glanced and told him to stop staring blankly. They should go now. Saou was confused until the elder pushed something on the wall, and a secret door was opening. Of course, Saou was astonished because he has never seen something quite like it before. A loud thud of sticks and people bowing greeted them, especially the elder, Hongmu Gyu. The doors opened a whole town inside, and they were welcome to the Jabang branch office in Taiwan. Saou couldn't believe it. Hundreds of people were bowing in front of them. The elder grinned and was very happy to see his people. In the crane soundwall home, a loud voice is being heard, asking if he's going to let him get away with it. A loud thump is heard as someone called his father. Turns out it was the fat young master. He convinced his father that he, his son, the young master who will be the heir of the crane soundwall, was almost killed by an unknown strange bastard. He yells at his father for just sitting there and watching. He added that the bastard challenged their crane soundwall, which has absolute authority there in Taiwan. He even said that even though Kong Wai is being detained by the court, if it's his father, he is sure that he can kill him. His father had enough. He stood up and pointed at his son. He exclaimed that if the young master didn't show any nasty behavior from the beginning, the problem wouldn't have arisen. But the young master still doesn't admit his mistakes. He questioned his son if he really didn't know that his own behavior is causing trouble for their crane sound wall. The spoiled young master got angry and sarcastically admitted that it was his fault and that almost getting killed was also his fault. He let out his excuse that he was just joking around a little bit and they killed themselves, talking about the women he harassed and eventually died. He sarcastically admitted that it was also his fault as a bad son. He had the guts to ask his father why he blamed him for their short lives. The father let out a sigh and closed his eyes. He couldn't believe he raised such a ruffian with all his gold and jade. The father is the head of the crane sound wall, Huang Dujong. The young master is frustrated. He won't back down just like that. His anger won't go away unless he rips off Kong Wai's limbs. He grabbed his sword and called the attention of his soldiers. He announces to them that he is Huang Muik, the heir of the group, and them as the disciple or the crane sound wall, and they are all his brothers. He stated that he's been threatened by Kong Wai, which means that he is also threatening all of them. The group agrees. He steps down and he is followed by the group. Today, on the name of the prestigious righteous group, the crane sound wall, he, Huang Muik, will uphold righteousness in Gango. He called his group because they are going to the military court. He pushes the door. It creaks open, and as soon as the door opens, it reveals the person they've been looking for. Muik asks who he is, but he just answers with a grin. Before Muik he could ask another question, Kong Wai's sword was already in the middle of his face. He'd been slashed in half along with his disciple, which created a loud explosion. The father, Dujong, was petrified to witness his son's death. He screamed his lungs out, calling Muik. He was enraged and drew his sword, swiftly moving towards Kong Wai to attack. He just stood still while grinning, waiting for his opponent while he called out Huang Dujong. He is the ringleader who caused all of it and allowed that devil to be born. He said that he should have judged his sins in the first place. Dujong thinks it's bullshit. He jumps and steps to the pieces of wreck that scattered up in the air as he lunges an attack to kill him to honor his son's soul. Dujong attacked above while Kong Wai blocked him. He grinned as he uttered the word extinguish the devil. Extinguishing the devil is his life's principle. Dujong's face is angrier. Kong Wai added that he expected, the crane sound wall is the devil. The righteous group that carries out the devil's deed doesn't deserve to survive. Dujong disagrees as his opponent pushes him with force. He swirls in the air but manages to land on the ground at ease. He made it clear that the crane sound wall is a group that pursues the right way, and that's the truth known by everyone in the entire Taiwan. Kong Wai just smirks. He judges them as the devil, and that's the truth. He became more enraged than before. Kong Wai's brute force is not going to work, and it seems like there's no point in having a conversation with him anymore. Dujong pointed his sword as he released his martial art. He will show his opponent the skills of the crane sound wall. Multiple swords appear in a circle surrounding him. He glared at Kong Wai and said that he would cut his head off, then he ordered his flying swords to shoot. Kong Wai stood for a second waiting for the swords. He called it a petty method skill of the crane sound wall. It's ridiculous, he added. He swiftly moves. Clanking of sword is heard as he dodge and block each one of it. In a blink of an eye it was all gone. Only him with no scratch. The remaining disciple was terrified. They couldn't believe that he blocked all the patriarch's flying swords. Dujong was lost in words. He gritted his teeth and released another method which he calls the Great Master ascends to the mountain. He was engulfed with strong force, especially his sword. Kong Wai was quite amused. He commented it is pretty useful. Dujong made his way towards his opponent as he was determined to stab through his heart. His opponent smiled devilishly and said that it is useful, but if it's true that his real ability lies in that mere power only, then he must be destroyed together with the crane sound wall. He swayed his sword and let out a powerful force. He released the merciless great range attack that easily countered Dujong's attack. He was pushed by the force, and with the blinding light all he could feel was his body cutting in half. The method led to an explosion that destroyed the place. Under the full moon, inside the Jabang's branch was a fire cooking a meal. It looks pretty and smells delicious, someone commented. Saou asks, what kind of food is it? He answered that it is the prestigious food of Jabang, the Sagu soup. It is a special food that must be eaten when arriving at the Jabang. He added that to make the Sagu soup, you have to stew the snake and the dog for hours and add the secret seasoning of Jabang. He smiled and told Saou to eat a lot. On the other hand, Saou looks disgusted by what he heard. Horror is painted all over his face. He disagreed with the elder and said no. He won't eat it. In fact, the elder could just eat it by himself. Meanwhile, at their back, someone whispered something to the branch head that made him shocked. The two looked at them. Saou did not say anything while the elder asked what happened. The head turned and informed them that Kong Wai attacked the crane sound wall. The elder seems like he is lost for words, but with Saou he looks like he's been expecting it, but still in silence. Then, we are brought to a gambling house. Kong Wai appears along with his sword. He was quite startled at the scene. People are gathered playing the Sangyuk game, a traditional Korean game. It has a game board, 30 horses, and 2 dice. The players will move as many horses as the number that appears on the dice. The biggest number on the dice is 6, and if both roll a 6, there is a high probability of winning. Kong Wai stared at the people below as the room filled with laughter and cursing because of the different outcomes of the game. Someone called him from behind. They exchanged replies about someone. The man bowed to show respect and asked Kong Wai to follow him. They both walk to where the man leads him. The man opens the door with both of his hands, and they both enter. Kong Wai remains silent. The man led him to a secret passage and directed him to go inside. He was welcomed by an old man saying that he couldn't believe the underworld devil sword came to visit the place in person. He added that it is such an honor. Kong Wai recognized him as the head of gambling and complimented that he chose a pretty good place. Those who are spying on him will think that he is there to gamble. They wouldn't expect that there's a secret room in a place like that. Kong Wai's face turned serious as he changed the topic. He asked the real reason why he was called there. The head of the gambling, or better known as the head of the black merchants, Yomsak escorted him there to ask for his help. He has a feeling, so he asks if it is all about the 5 Dragon League's order. Sak replied to him that it is about his personal matter, but he believes it will bring a great deal of benefit to the 5 Dragon Leagues as well. He smiled at his response and turned around. He said not to order him around for such an uncertain matter because he's not interested. Sak intertwined his hands and said that it's too bad. He smirks and asks him, would he believe it only after those nasty people from other countries entered their land and obtained enormous wealth? It piqued Kong Wai's interest. He was triggered about what he was talking about earlier. Sak mentioned the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. From what he heard, the top leaders of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group are the father and daughter who came from Goryeo 10 years ago. Kong Wai's anger was starting to show. How dare those petty outlanders obtain wealth from Jungwon, he said. Sak continued to fuel him with information that currently the condition of the black merchant is not good. In Taiwan, the brothel under the black merchants and this gambling house are somehow doing fine. But their most profitable business couldn't avoid the damage caused by the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. And he feels like it's unfair that the 5 Dragon Leagues have turned their back on the black merchants which have been cooperating with them for a long time. He heard that they are starting negotiations together. He even added that the scale of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group is big. He then asks Kong Wai's opinion that, no matter how big the profit is, they shouldn't make a deal with outlanders. Kong Wai held onto his sword, screaming to extinguish the devil. He agreed to what Sak said. He said, how dare those outlanders cross their territory in the land? His aura darkened as his eyes glow. He uttered that people from outside the Great Ming are without a doubt devils. Great Ming refers to the ruling dynasty of China from 1368 to 1644 following the collapse of the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty. He was angry and will show them how terrifying the power of Jungwon is. He left the room provoked and will make the Great Heavenly Merchant Group disappear from Taiwan soon. Sak smiled and felt satisfied with Kong Wai's attitude. A man appeared behind him. It was the archer. He complimented how amazing Sak is because he could make Kong Wai move easily. He indeed deserved to be called the best among the black merchants. Sak glanced at him as he noticed that the archer praised him too much. Well, it seems like he likes it too. He talked about Kong Wai. He heard that ever since his parents were killed by the Yuan army, he has developed antipathy towards outlanders. He smiled and admitted that he just gave Kong Wai a little motivation, and except for that he didn't really do much. The archer was quite impressed. and praised him for that because that's the point which makes him a scary person. Then, he asks if that matter will proceed according to plan. Saou did not expect he would ask that but still smirks. He wanted to escort him there at least once. He invited him that they should go together. To the wall of red tears. The archer seems like he would love to go too. In a busy area, Saou is in an inn where he sat at one table having a drink. He poured the liquor into his cup as he appreciated looking at the moon after taking a bath, and drinking liquor is pretty nice in its own way. But still, he was debating to himself whether he should have killed Kong Wai back then. Suddenly he remembered what he heard a while ago about Kong Wai destroying the Crane Sound Wall. All the disciples of the Crane Sound Wall have been slaughtered. The head and the young master of the Crane Sound Wall have been hanged to death, informed by the head. The elder was confused that he even hanged them. He asks if there is a reason why he threatened them publicly. Then, he orders the head to pick 3 or 4 outstanding men and keep an eye on the underworld devil sword and don't miss a slightest thing. The head quickly accepted his orders. End of flashback. Saou did not think much of it because the Jabang will take care of it. He spoke to himself about the relation between the black merchants and the 5 Dragon League. Like he said before, it can be troublesome if you mess with them hastily. He answered himself that first of all, going to the Great Heavenly Merchant Group is their priority since it has a big branch office in Taiwan. He's sure that it will be easy to find it. If the Underworld Devil Sword is really related to the black merchants, then, before he could finish his sentence, a red boots stepped into the inn. Saou curiously observed, and it was a lady with a red thin suit, long hair and thin red mask covering half of her face, along with 2 men with swords across their chests. What a lovely face she has. Saou familiarized something from the Gango directory book that the elder gave him, a blue cloud pattern which he could clearly see right now. Those people are certainly the disciple of the Manhwa sect. Also the red plum blossoms. It says that there are blood plum blossoms in Manhwa that spread their fragrance all over the world. He observes that woman is definitely one of the 3 flowers of Gango. She's the blood plum blossom, Damak Song Yun. Saou heard that the Manhwa sect follows Taoism, so they don't allow female disciples in, and here she is, Damak Song Yun, as a disciple who broke through that taboo. He was curious if it is a coincidence since such a person appears in Taiwan. The place was crowded, and someone told the woman that there's no empty seats. It looks like they have to share a table with others. She wandered her eyes in the room, then suddenly, her beautiful eyes landed on Saou. She was intrigued by him because of his unusual energy and also his blue eyes. She wonders if he is an outlander. Eventually, she walks toward his table and asks if it is okay if they join his table. She reasons out that there are no empty seats left. Saou was taken aback, but quickly allowed them and said that after all there is still plenty of space for him to sit alone. She was glad and immediately thanked him. As soon as they sat, the man gave the server their order, which were 3 bowls of thin noodles and 2 plates of dumplings. They let themselves be comfortable as the female spoke to Saou. She said that he shared his table with them but hadn't introduced themselves yet. Then she told him that her name is Damak Song Yun from Manhwa. She is petite and has this mysterious aura. The next one was the 2nd-generation disciple of Manhwa sect. He introduced himself as Ho Jongin. He looked serious and had pretty sharp eyes. The next man was the 2nd-generation disciple as well of Manhwa sect. His name is Sang Ho, and added that it was nice to meet Saou. He has a hat, a mustache, and drowsy eyes. It was Saou's turn, so he just introduced his name to them and did the hand gesture to show respect. Muho called him Master Dan and initiated a conversation. He said that it seems like Saou have martial arts skills, and so he was curious of which sect he is from. He smiled while pouring himself a drink and politely replied that he didn't belong to any sect in Youngwon. He glanced at Song Yun and added that he could only do a little self-protection and that he is ashamed to even call it martial arts. She glanced back and thought to herself that he is a person with deep self-composure. She can't figure out what Saou's intention is, so she has to stay on guard. After that, Saou stood and bid his goodbyes. It was getting late, so he would take his leave first. He smiled and sincerely said it was nice to meet them. Saou left and Jongin was impressed. He said that Saou is such a unique person and that normally when people hear that the woman is the blood plum blossom, they are not able to remain calm like Saou did. She stared at Saou's back and replied that the world is wide and he doesn't have much knowledge, so he may not know her. She assures Zhang Yin to not bother himself about it. He looked at her and added what he observed a while ago. Judging from Saou's name and accent, he thinks that he's from a remote area or a foreign country. He reminded them that in the current situation, they need to be cautious about unidentified people because he might be related to the underworld devil sword. Song Yun's eyes became serious as she responded that they couldn't confirm his exact identity, but she thinks that Saou has nothing to do with the crane soundwall incident. She recalls his aura and knows that he has martial arts skills, but what's more amusing is that she can't feel his QI energy at all. She questioned herself if it was too sensitive for her to be more afraid of his undetectable QI. ManHwa shared his thoughts if it means that the crane soundwall incident was a crime that the underworld devil sword committed alone. Because no matter how strong the underworld devil sword is, do they think that it's possible for him to act so recklessly against the most powerful group in Taiwan? She is not sure about that, but the Kongwai she knew is a person who acts based on his own beliefs, so he's not someone who plans things with other people. They will make sure about it once they meet John Du-Su from the Great Heavenly Merchant Group tomorrow, she added. Then, she requested ManHwa to order a bottle of Zweiking liquor for her. ManHwa wasn't sure if it was okay if they ordered liquor. Zhang Yin added that the teacher forbids them from drinking it. She just reasoned that they are tired after a long journey. Wouldn't it be okay if they drink just one glass of it? She asks. Morning came, and the area became busy again. Saou was casually walking when suddenly Song Yun saw him. She was preparing her sword and immediately recognized him even from the back. She was thinking that he was the man yesterday. Soon she recalled his name, so sure that it was Master Dan. She admitted that she doesn't care much about him, but he kept making her feel uneasy. She stared at him and wondered where he was going so early in the morning. She closes her sword and jumps out of the window. As soon as she got out, ManHwa called her and asked if she was already awake because they had to hurry if they wanted to meet the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. She was not answering, so he figured to come inside. Opening the door made a creak sound. They called her again, but to no avail. She was not in her room. ManHwa was curious where she could have been. In the gambling house, there was the sword. It was screaming to extinguish the devil. Kongwai is sitting beside it. He looks like he's been thinking about the offer. He said that after all, they are devils that must be destroyed. He smiled. It'll be better to destroy them faster, he added, pertaining to the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. He grabbed his sword and is determined to extinguish that disgusting outlander of theirs. Another place is shown. It can be heard exchanging conversations. Someone said that yesterday, 72 spears were sold and 200 swords were received. The Blue Dragon Group from Jiangsu Province ordered the iron themselves. Turns out the place is where the Great Heavenly Merchant Group is located. It was from a room somewhere inside. Someone responded that it was expected. It seems like Jiangsu making their own weapons. Inside the room there is a table at the center with a man, and at the right side of the man was another person with a table. The man at the side reminded the person at the center that he has a dinner appointment with the deputy chief of Taiwan today, and that he prepared the expense accordingly. He sounds like what a manager would do. The other man responded that the Taiwan branch is a place to make money, not only for the merchants but also for the government officials dispatched at their place. That man is the head of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group's Taiwan branch office. None other than John Du-Su, the master trader. Du-Su knew it already. The newly appointed deputy chief of Taiwan, UST, also expect that kind of money, and his reason for inviting him for dinner isn't any different either. The manager did not ask otherwise, because he understands. He is the general manager of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group, Jabang. Du-Su ordered his manager to prepare everything plentifully. The reconstruction work for the fortress gate that collapsed yesterday must be done by them, the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. He smirks and utters that if they are going to give him a bribe, they have to do it earnestly. They have to feed him properly on the first dinner so that the effectiveness lasts for long, he added. Jabang agrees and assures the head that he will make sure everything's ready, then closes his notes before respectfully taking his leave. Du-Du allowed him, but before he could leave, Du-Su remembered something. He heard that ManWorld is back from Shenyang, and so he asks Jabang to bring ManWorld in. He seems like he wasn't expecting that the cause of Dong Chion's death was the king of war whose identity is unknown. The other responds that what's strange is that the Jabang is deliberately controlling the information. He became curious about it because it is impossible for Jabang to do it without any reasons, so he ordered the other person to find out more about it. Also, he asks about the movement of the black merchants. The person with a sword that is having a conversation with Du Su is the guardian warrior of the great heavenly merchant group, Sip Myung Y. He responded that there are no particular movements so far. Du Su has a doubt. It has already been 3 months, and he can't believe that there hasn't been any movement from the black merchants in 3 months. He shares information to Myung Y that there are a lot of merchant groups in Taiwan, but only the black merchants can be an obstacle to the great heavenly merchant group. He is sure that the black merchants also think the same, from delivering weapons to government officials and sect to various profitable businesses. He feels grateful that the black merchant who competed fiercely with him isn't active now, but that makes him more anxious. Especially the head of the black merchants, Yom Saik. That man is never an easy one to deal with. There's no way that Saik will just sit and do nothing. He commanded Myung Y to observe the black merchant's movement closely. Myung Y informs him that someone related to Saik, the underworld devil sword, one of the 5 great warriors of the 5 Dragon League, appeared in Taiwan. Du Su knew about it as well. He created a sea of blood as soon as he arrived. At first, he killed the young master of the Crane Soundwall, Huang Muik. After that, he killed the head of the Crane Soundwall, Huang Dujong. They were all killed by the underworld devil sword. And he didn't stop there. Then the flashback of the scene where Kong Wai executed his killings, Du Su continued what he's saying, that he slaughtered all the disciples and the servants of the Crane Soundwall. Back to the scene when he finished slaughtering the people, he read the sign that says the Crane Soundwall. He wasn't a big fan of that, and so he tore down the sign because for him a group that has been destroyed doesn't need it. Myung Y said that the purpose of Kong Wai's appearance in Taiwan is still unknown, but whatever the purpose is, as long as he remains one of the 5 warriors, the purpose must be related to the 5 Dragon Leagues. And if it's related to the 5 Dragon Leagues, it must also be related to the black merchants. So there will definitely be movement from the black merchants soon. Du Su agrees with him, because in the end what matters is what they are planning, but it's hard for them to know that. He pictured out the images of Yom Saik and the underworld devil sword, the black merchants, and the 5 Dragon League. He suddenly mentions about the young lady. If she was there in times like that, she would have definitely been able to find out those people's intentions. He then thinks of a solution to contact her. As they were talking about her, a servant ran towards their location. Myung Y recalls that recently the young lady has been busy with the Iron Martial Association, especially for the negotiations with the 5 Dragon League, so she doesn't have time to be there, and suggests that they have to solve the problem by themselves. The servant arrives inside and announces that there's a letter from the young lady. Myung Y's reaction was confused. However, Du Su's face says otherwise. He stood and was excited to receive it, so he immediately ordered the servant to hand him the letter. He opens the letter with excitement. He is relieved that the young lady always sends letters when they need her. He was expecting some solution to their problem, but taken back with what the letter really contains. He put down the letter aggressively. That made Myung Y concerned. He asked if it contained bad news. Du Su faces the window to get some fresh air. He informs him that it seems like the young lady is facing difficulties in the negotiation with the 5 Dragon League, because they are making excessive demands on them. Myung Y tried to gather what he was saying, and said that if it was excessive demands, then he was not able to finish the sentence as he realized what it meant. Du Su still made it clear that they demanded all weapons from their Taiwan branch be supplied to them, and they also demanded marriage of convenience. It is a marriage contracted for reasons other than love, usually for a personal or family advantage, and for social, politica, or economic reasons. That made Myung Y furious. How dare they insult the young lady? They can't just let them get away with it. If the young lady calls him for help, he will be ready to bring all the warriors of the great heavenly merchant group to go to the 5 Dragon League at any time, he exclaimed. Du Su just reminded him to calm down. She sent them the letter in case they get carried away. They need to trust her and wait. Myung Y should know what kind of person she is. She's the one who has helped their leader, and she was able to turn the great heavenly merchant group into a business of an enormous scale in just 10 years. Now that Du Su thinks about it, it's been a long time since he saw the young lady. He really wished to meet her that day. On the other hand, a lady is being approached by a man behind and called her. She asks what it was without looking. The man told her that the person sent by the 5 Dragon Leagues is there. The lady glanced behind. She understood the man and is going to meet the person now. She has big bright eyes with cute features, a familiar bright blue butterfly suited with her hair. She is none other than the young lady of the great heavenly merchant group, HoHo. Meanwhile, Song Yun is on the top. She's standing while observing Saou below. She was curious enough to follow him. She wanted to know what Saou is up to, unsure if he's just going sightseeing. She's quite disappointed because she thought he was moving for a purpose. She doubted herself. Before she could think anything, Saou stopped walking and glanced at exactly where she was. Gladly, she was fast to react and move somewhere. However, it didn't escape Saou's sharp instincts because he knew he was being followed by her all along. He uttered to himself that if she's going to follow him, she shouldn't let herself be caught. He added that if she's going to do it clumsily, it would be better for her to just ask him to walk with her, such a funny man. She moved to the other side and hid behind a wall. She thought to herself that she erased all of her traces perfectly. Is it possible that she still got caught, still doubting? Then, her eyes locked to someone as if she's seeing a ghost. She mentioned that guy. Sau's eyes are serious. He sarcastically complimented how amazing that guy was. After a massacre he did yesterday, and now he's walking down the street calmly. Kong Wai and Saou's path crossed again. Kong Wai was surprised as well. He didn't expect to meet him there. Saou stared at him. Indeed, he knew him. The underworld devil sword, Kong Wai. Of course he admits that he's Kong Wai, and there's still something left to be done with Saou. Song Yun saw Kong Wai for the first time. She couldn't believe that he showed up personally. She was even more puzzled if they knew each other. She puts on her mask and doubts if Saou is really related to the crane soundwall incident, just like Jongin mentioned. She held tightly to her sword and thought that she should interfere. The two face each other. Saou heard him being imprisoned in the military court. He responds that they will never be able to lock him up with a mere prison. But he's sure that he never told Saou his name. He asks him if he knew him already. Saou responds that it would be weird if he didn't know him, after all the mess he created yesterday. Saou is having an internal thought that he defeated Kong Wai, but he doesn't look scared at all, and more than that, even if he broke his arm and shoulder, Kong Wai was able to recover in just a day. On the contrary, Kong Wai was having a thought as well. Saou's color of eyes as well as his accent. As expected, he's from a foreign country. He blamed him because the punishment for the crane sound wall was delayed, which means he's a devil too, he added. He is angry, but he can't defeat him with his current ability, but no matter how strong the opponent is, he will never kneel before the devil. Kong Wai smiled and told Saou that his body was itching since morning. Maybe it was because he was going to meet Saou. He held his sword and added that he couldn't stand it when people who were no good for the Ming dynasty stride down the street calmly. He was raging and exclaimed to extinguish the devil. He grinned and uttered that Saou is a person who deserves to be killed. Kong Wai is determined to cut his throat. A woman with red boots appeared. She couldn't believe that Kong Wai evaluated his opponents according to his own rules and made a summary of judgment. The woman appeared in between the two men. The woman was Song Yun. Both men were surprised by her sudden appearance. She greeted Saou and wanted to discuss his relationship with the underworld devil sword later. Saou was puzzled by what she meant about the relationship. He let out a sigh because of the situation becoming strange. It looks like she misunderstood something. She faced Kong Wai and greeted him. She couldn't believe that she was meeting Kong Wai in Taiwan. Kong Wai asks her if she is the young lady Danmok. He slid his sword in as he recognized the bloody plum blossom. He was surprised to meet the woman of ability from Manhwa sect in Taiwan. Kong Wai's inner thoughts were puzzled. He was sure that the woman had come there under the 9 Central secret mission, but she revealed herself so easily. He wondered if it was because of that person, pertaining to Saou. He continued to reply that it is indeed him, and he came to go sightseeing in the countryside. Kong Wai held his sword up as he asked if she was there to grab something to eat. Song Yun is also on guard with her sword as she sarcastically asks Kong Wai if his sightseeing in the countryside relates to annihilation of innocent warriors, and mockingly thanked him for what he's done that made Taiwan upside down. Looked like it hit some nerve to Kong Wai. He asks if she was pertaining to the crane sound wall. He turns bitterly as he hears the word innocent and disagrees because the whole world knows about their wrongdoings. It's not only that, They were also a faction run by a demon, he added. Song Yun commented on him not to be stubborn. The Crane Soundwall was a faction run with the right guidance. Kong Wai replied that because of the Crane Wall's nasty sun, dozens of hundreds of people suffered. He smiled and asked if those victims understood her assertion. His aura became dark as he exclaimed that the young master who was supposed to set a good example for the faction was acting like a jerk. Even the father Huang Duzhong, who was supposed to take responsibility, didn't do anything to address the issue. Then he informs her that onlookers who defend demons are also considered demons. Kong Wai also mentioned that when big disasters start with unimportant things, misery sprout must be cut ahead of time. His face is dangerously serious as he concluded that the Crane Soundwall was a faction run by a demon. He smiled devilishly as he stated his conviction to extinguish the devil, even if it requires him to destroy dozens, no, hundreds of factions. The image of him in a battlefield surrounded with dead bodies showed. He continued saying to not intend to break his conviction because he doesn't want to change it. He glared at her and tightened his grasp on his sword. It doesn't matter even if the opponent is a follower of the path of the Iron Martial Association. Saou let out a sigh and crossed his arms. It seems like Kong Wai was stronger than he thought, and it looks like there might be a bloodbath today. Song Yun replied, seems like she has no choice. Mthua sect, which is affiliated with the Iron Martial Association's 9 Centrals, and Kong Wai, who is affiliated with the 5 Dragon League. The fight between the two of them might lead them to a fight between two powerful groups. She's certain that Kong Wai knows it better than anyone else. She grip her sword and she'll think of the fight as a challenge to Mthua and 9 Centrals. She is surrounded by confidence and a powerful aura as she prepares in a fighting position. She doesn't have any plan of avoiding it. She must face him. Her beautiful eyes are full of determination. She will show him how excellent Mthua sect is. With his hands on his hips, Saou's left thinking about the situation in front of him. Bloody Plum Blossom Damok Song Yun. She's the first woman to become a remarkable disciple of Mthua sect. He frowns as the 5 warriors Kong Wai has no reason to back down. Saou was startled as people behind him started murmuring. They are talking if there is going to be a fight. One of them identifies Kong Wai. Someone from the crowd informs everyone about the massacre of the Crane Soundwall sect that happened yesterday, and the culprit's name is Kong Wai. The 3 of them were surrounded by the crowd. Others recognize Kong Wai's opponent, the Bloody Blossom of Manhwa. Saou suddenly got worried as the bystanders were rushing in. In that state, if a fight really occurs, a lot of people will get hurt. Song Yun's companion arrived at the scene. They were still looking for her. Mu-ho clearly told her that they would go to meet John Du-su of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group that morning. Zhang noticed the crowd and got curious about what was going on. Suddenly they saw the figure of the woman they were looking for. Shock flushed through their eyes as they saw Song Yun with the dangerous Kong Wai. The 2 of them rushed to join forces with Song Yun as they noticed that she is facing Kong Wai. They were ready to support their senior sister, and Saou saw them. The 2 individuals glared at each other as they swing the swords towards each other. Upon seeing Song Yun's companions, he thought that if those 2 joined forces, the situation will completely slip out of hand. So he thought that it would be better to stop them. As the swords swung in the air, Saou was able to stop the momentum of their hands applied with his technique. The 2 were caught off guard. Song Yun flinched and was shocked to see Saou, while Kong Wai shivers with the touch of him. Saou's words to make them stop felt like a god suddenly spoke as they both obeyed him. He eyed Song Yun as he made criticism about her being revered as the 9 Centrals and Mount Hua's woman of ability, but she fell for just a little provocation. He stated that obviously the people who were gathered around were going to get hurt if they started a fight. Song Yun's eyes widened. She was speechless by his sudden remark. Then, Saou glanced towards Kong Wai. He also made a comment about him, who's known to be the best among the 5 Dragon League's 5 warriors, and he's trying to kill the person he provoked. Saou's eyes became sharp like a sword. 9 Centrals and 5 Dragon Leagues. The 2 powerful groups should be the one to establish good examples to others. Kong Wai was sweating because of nervousness. Contemplating whether to back down or not, Kong Wai made a decision to not be scared because he won't be able to face Saou anymore. He shouted at the top of his lungs and fought for his conviction that he will not back down as long as his opponent is a demon. His veins started to pop as his muscles became stronger. Saou had enough. He already warned him but didn't listen, and so he must accept his punishment. Saou's aura changed, and his familiar blue lightning streaks were emitting all over his body. Competing with him is the same as putting a life on the line. Saou's hands that were holding Kong Wai's swords emit light. Saou controlled his power and made it travel towards his hands and transfer it to Kong Wai's. With that simple touch, Kong Wai's energy was sucked and his bones and muscles were being twisted that made him cry out of pain. It's like his life flashes through his eyes and he wonders if it is how he would die. Then suddenly, nothing happened. It's like waking up in a nightmare. He was certain that his energy and bones were. He couldn't even finish his sentence in his head. He couldn't believe what just happened. Saou was so powerful that he made him see what death looks like with his mere touch. Kong Wai pulled his hands. He thought that if he opened up his strength and launched a surprise attack, he would have a chance. He pulled himself together and moved back away from Saou. The plan he was thinking about was just his delusions. He can't win against Saou. No matter what technique he uses, he will certainly die at the hands of Saou. Saou understood Kong Wai's body language of moving back. He stated that Kong Wai made the right decision. He doesn't want to kill useless people either. Song Yun's companions finally arrived. They were both shocked to see the fight suddenly stopped. It's as if they didn't see anything happen. They were still in disbelief and saw Saou. They were curious if he was the one who stopped the fight. On the other hand, Saou still held Song Yun's hands. He asked her what she was doing. Her opponent had stopped, so she must stop as well. She was startled and called Saou's name. He did not let go of her hand as he walked past Kong Wai whilst pulling her beside him. Kong Wai suddenly asks his name. Saou heard him and turned his head sideward. He was silent for a moment and eventually stated his name, Dan Saou. Song Yun's companions followed the two of them. However, Kong Wai still stood there while trembling. He knew that Damok Song Yun had got a secret order to shadow him ever since he left the martial association. Shadow means to follow and observe someone closely and secretly. He knew that, but with Saou, with his identity, he couldn't believe Saou dared to do that. He's still in disbelief that he has been humiliated by a barbarian outlander. His extinguishing of the devil is still there. His faith will not collapse that easily. He was profusely sweating as he thought of killing Saou. He trembles because he knows he can't win if he face him alone. He thought of someone who could help him in that situation, which is Yomsak. Saou was greeted by the two individuals. He recognized them from the Jabang. The two of them bow to show respect and introduce themselves. The voluptuous man is a level 1 disciple, Li Geology, with his skinny acquaintance named Zhang Du. There are several levels in Jabang. One of them is Ilgeol, which is level 1. It's the lowest ranking in Jabang that can be obtained after one has performed a task as a white beggar, people who just entered the Jabang, for 3 years and recognized for one's skills. Saou asks the two of them if they receive an order from the elder. It looks like they were spying on Kong Wai, but he told them honestly that it's not a good idea as of the moment. Because right now, Kong Wai is extremely sensitive. He's sure that he will hurt anyone who bothers him without any hesitation. Especially, if he finds out that the Jabang is spying on him, Saou is sure that there will be a huge mess. Song Yun glanced at Saou. She was curious about him because of his relations not only with Kong Wai, but also with the Jabang. As she thought, Saou is not an ordinary man. The confrontation between her and Kong Wai was something where no one else would ever dare to intervene. Zhang Du bowed and stated that he understood Saou's concern. They will spy on him more carefully. Song Yun's companions arrived at the scene where Saou's hand still held hers. Zhang called her and continuously asked where she's been since morning. He paused and noticed the scene. Zhang called Saou and commented that he doesn't know what's happening there, but he thinks that it's not polite for him to keep holding her hands like that. Muho just meaningfully coughs. Saou realizes and apologizes to her as he removes his hands. Her companions then said that they were running out of time, and they needed to go to the Great Heavenly Merchant Group right now. Song Yun agrees. Saou heard the Great Heavenly Merchant Group that piqued his interests. He then asks if they were planning to go to the Heavenly Merchant Group's Taiwan branch office and asks if he could join them. They were shocked and clueless, but Muho replied that they are on their way now. Suddenly, Song Yun recalled the conversation with someone. A man on his back called her name. He told her that she received such a tough mission. But she has to succeed not only for the 9 centrals, but also for herself. He continued complimenting her for being such a talented person that she's even called a sage inside the 9 centrals. The man slowly turned as he pointed out what she should do and what not, whom she should stay away from, and whom she should affiliate with. Those are matters in which she has to make her own choice. Song Yun understood it and called the man Sword Saint. In the present, she's still thinking about that advice in relation to Saou. She thought about him knowing Kong Wai, but they seem to hate each other. Looking at the fact that the Jabang's level 1 disciples treated him so respectfully, she's sure that he has a deep relationship with the Jabang. Then, the person he called elder is most likely the patriarch of the Jabang. She is in deep thought that if Saou has a close relationship not only with the Jabang but also with its patriarch, then it won't cause any harm for her to know him. At least she's sure now that he's not a threat to the world. Remembering the Sword Saint's words, Saou is someone she needs to affiliate with so that she can turn Jabang into an ally for the 9 centrals. Song Yun said that it's not far from where they are and invited him that they should go together. Few moments have passed and now, we can see the great Heavenly Merchant Group's Taiwan branch office. The 4 of them made it in front of the entrance. Saou was amazed by the structure and its size. He looked mesmerized. He couldn't believe that it is the great Heavenly Merchant Group's branch office and how big it can be. The person in front of the entrance bowed and asked Song Yun what brought them there. Song Yun showed an item as she introduced herself and stated that she would like to meet the head of the great Heavenly Merchant Group's Taiwan branch office. Saou saw it and got curious if it was a trust item. She told him that the head would understand if he showed him the item she brought. The man understood and told them to wait for a moment. Saou notices the familiar butterfly and knew he had the same item. As he recalls it, it was from a little girl. He looked for it inside his clothes and found the same item. It was also a butterfly. He thinks that the shape is similar but still doubts it. Suddenly he remembered a conversation a while back. Said that one day, she will become a great merchant in the mainland, so that no one will underestimate and deceive them anymore. Her name was HoHo. She gave Saou an item that she values the most, which is the blue butterfly with dangling at the bottom. She happily handed it to him, since it has the same color as his eyes. She also mentioned that when she becomes a great merchant, she will treat him well if he brings the item back to her. Saou smiled upon remembering her name. He's sure that she will succeed as a merchant. He then stopped reminiscing when he was called by Song Yun, telling him that they will head inside. Saou did not protest. Upon entering, he thought that he might get information about the black merchant in the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. In addition to that, he might also get news about HoHo, clueless about the girl he met. He misses her suddenly. A voice curiously asked about what he heard pertaining to their young lady's trust item. Song Yun answered his curiosity that sometime the 2 of them became friends. Song Yun gave their young lady a trust item in exchange for hers as well. Since then, Song Yun has been cherishing it for a long time. After that, she introduced herself as well as her companions. The 2 state their names, while Saou remained silent. He bowed and acknowledged Song Yun and also introduced himself. His name is Jabang, the general manager of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group's Taiwan branch office. He stated that if she has the trust item from their young lady, then she is a special guest for the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. Afterwards, he invited them to head inside because their master was waiting for them. Saou paid little attention to the conversation. He was more focused on the structure of the building. He finds it interesting and couldn't believe a mere merchant group, more precisely a mere branch office, could be that big. He wondered if the little girl she met also had that kind of manner. He thought that it's been only 10 years since she went to the mainland. Maybe it's still too early for her to achieve that much wealth. Song Yun noticed him spacing out, so she asked if it was his first time coming there. Song Yun stated that she has an acquaintance whom she met at the Iron Martial Association, and she has a relationship with the Great Heavenly Merchant Group. It just happened that it has a branch there in Taiwan, so Song Yun stopped by. She gave Saou advice that if he wants to socialize, he better make a lot of friends. Saou was just silent. He hasn't shown any curiosity about that, so he wasn't sure why she still bothered to explain it. Someone asked Song Yun's reasons for what brought her there. Their place is thousands of miles away from both Manhwa and the Iron Martial Association, so it must not be easy for her to come there. Song Yun replied that she's there to ask for help. Jean Du-Su, the head of the Great Heavenly Merchant Group's Taiwan branch office, asks if she's there because of the problem regarding the underworld devil sword and Yomesaic. That's right, she replied. It is the only place in Taiwan where she can ask for help. He mentioned that they were also keeping their eyes on Kong Wai, the underworld devil sword, because they suspect that he has a relation with their rival merchant group, which is the Black Merchants. Saou, in his mind, also expected that Kong Wai is related with the Black Merchants. The head gave the order to his follower to give the item to Song Yun. He mentioned that they were not allowed to show it to outsiders, but, since they are the guests of the young lady, they will show it to her. The servant handed a little notebook, which contains the information about Yomesaic's business, which they recently investigated. He added that over the years, they've been working hard to find out where Saik lives, his business, his profit, and his relationship not only with the officials but also with other groups. Song Yun was in great shock at how valuable the notebook is. The head stated that they couldn't figure out the reason why Kong Wai came to Taiwan, but they suspected that he had a certain deal with the Black Merchants. His face got more serious and added that if their suspicions regarding the deal between Kong Wai and Yomsak are true, then it must be an order that originated from the Five Dragon League. Song Yun immediately rustled and picked up the notebook as she browsed the information regarding what Yomsak's doing. She read something about 20 years ago, where they are having a deal with the Moyong family regarding human trafficking, which includes child trafficking. Saou's eyes widened as he remembered something about 20 years ago with the Moyong family. The head noticed the sudden change of his face. His eyes looked over Saou and was greeted with his straight body sitting on the chair. His thoughts were clouded by how Saou didn't show any reaction when he got there, but suddenly reacted when the Moyong family was mentioned. But Saou returned to his original expressions right away. He obviously knows how to hide his emotions. The head is still wary of Saou and also his blue eyes. The head was now curious as to who he was. Suddenly Song Yun interrupted his thoughts. She thanks them for sharing important information with them, and added that it is quite impossible for them to give her that valuable information for free. She asks if there is something that they want. The head thinks and says that, of course he is a traitor. What he wants is to minimize the loss of the great heavenly merchant group that has been caused by this problem. He added that if an accident occurs due to what Song Yun is doing right now, the 9 Centrals will intervene in this matter to resolve it. That's what he wants. Song Yun's eyes sharpened and asked why he chose that as his condition. His face became more serious. He replied that the matter of the massacre if the crane sound wall was hushed up, so not many people know about it. But yesterday, there was an incident where the soldiers guarding the Taiwan military court were massacred by Kong Wai, or maybe his accomplice. He added that the crane sound wall incident might be passed as a case if revenge or a conflict between groups, but seeing that the military authorities of Taiwan didn't move even after so many soldiers were killed, they suspected that the new deputy chief of Taiwan might have a deeper relationship with the Five Dragon League. He continued saying that if that's the case, then there won't be any interference from the officials in anything Kong Wai will do from now on. Then an image of Kong Wai appeared with the devil's sword on his waist and the 5-colored dragon on his back. The head continues saying that is why he wanted to request help from the 9 Centrals. Unfortunately, she didn't have the authority to deploy the 9 Centrals, Song Yun said with her poker eyes. The head also agreed that it must be difficult for her to deploy the entire 9 Centrals, but isn't it possible for her to deploy those who are in Taiwan? He asked. Saou was just silently sitting there, hearing what they were talking about. He obviously thought that their conversation was ruthless and that they were also not ordinary people. Song Yun grasped her knee, thinking that if she has to pay such a price to find out what the Five Dragon League is planning, then it won't be a loss. Then she replied and agreed to keep the head's request. She will try to mobilize all the branch offices of the Iron Martial Association in and around the Taiwan, she added. The head was satisfied with her answer and also agreed that they will also give their support unsparingly. Suddenly he gazed upon Saou and mentioned that he came with Song Yun, but the head didn't pay much attention to him. Saou gave him a poker face and replied that he was just her companion after all, so he didn't have to worry about him. The head smiled and told him that that's not the case. He emphasized that Saou came with Song Yun, and what's more important is that he witnessed the confidential conversations. Judging from that opportunity that he was allowed to have, he can tell that Saou was far from an ordinary man. Instead, Song Yun replied that the reason why she invited Saou is to accompany the embrace. She made a request to him. Saou was also taken aback. He didn't know that she had such a request. Song Yun looked at him, and she estimated that Saou have a very close relationship with the Jabang. Recently, more precisely, she added. After the death of Moyong Dong Chion, the head of the Moyong family in Liaoning province, it seems like the Jabang has started to control all the information. The Jabang has not provided any information, not on why to the 9 centrals, but also the entire Iron Martial Association. The head looked stunned that Saou was with the Jabang. Song Yun continues saying that, of course, they're aware that they have to pay a reasonable price to get information from them. Although the relationship between the Jabang and the 9 centrals is not the same as it used to be, if Saou helped them, she guarantees that he will also gain a great profit from it. Saou closed his eyes and was a bit irritated. He released a scary aura. He thought that the reason Song Yun was following him since morning is because of his relationship with the Jabang. He half opened his eyes and said that his relationship with the Jabang is not as close as she thought. He glared and continued saying that since he had an acquaintance there, he would convey her request, then reminded her to not expect too much. People in the same room as Saou felt the intense pressure that he revealed. The head realized that he was indeed not an ordinary man. Hi everyone. What do you think about this video? Are you down for part 4? If so, leave a comment down below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.